Okay, starting up with our podcast here for our quiz on Wednesday, chapters 6.1 through 6.3. This is our information, where it's located, beginning with definitions. Gravity, it's going to be the attractive force between all objects, and it's going to depend on the mass of the objects and their distance. Greater the mass, greater the gravity, the closer they are to each other, the more effect they're going to have on each other. Constellation, we did these with Mrs. Harper. It's going to be a pattern or grouping of stars that people imagine to represent a figure or object. You guys heard a lot of names that were familiar to you from your discussions in social studies. These constellations, those that are the polar constellations, those are going to stay the same for a majority of the year, kind of depending on where you're at in the northern hemisphere on how they look, how close they are to Polaris. But the others that do follow the path of the sun are going to change, and those especially in the southern hemisphere, are going to change depending upon the different parts of the year, and the Earth's revolution causes that, so our movement around the sun. Inertia, this is purely the tendency of an object to continue moving in a straight line, or if it's stationary, it's not moving, it's going to remain in place. So it's that resistance to those two things. Equinox, 2 times a year we have an equinox, spring and fall. Those are going to be the 2 times where the hemisphere is neither tilted towards or away. It is equal, so as you can see in here, the equal and equinox. Pretty simple to remember, put those two together. Mariah, Mr. Cora went through a lot of this, dark flat areas on the moon's surface formed from huge ancient lava flows. Pretty obvious to see even with the naked eye when you look up. And then we've done quite a bit with craters in my room, both classes. A large round pit caused by the impact of a meteoroid. And again, some of us have talked, you could say impact of a meteoroid. Obviously once it hits, that's going to be the meteorite. So the book, it's a little wordy when we talk about it. And Galileo was actually the first to discover these craters. So he's usually a pretty good answer to choose when you start talking about space and discovering things. Next up, we have rotation. It's going to be that spinning motion of any planet on its axis. Could be a moon, a dwarf planet also. It takes about 24 hours for Earth to rotate. As we go through the rest of the solar system, you'll see there is a difference in the time of rotation for each of the planets. And what does rotation cause? It causes night and day. Revolution, it's going to be the movement of an object around another. So you talk about the moon around the Earth around the sun. For Earth, it's going to take about 365 days. We've talked about 365 and a quarter. We have February 29th this month because it is leap year, and that's going to be one Earth year overall. It's also part of why we have seasons. So tilt gets a big part of the credit, but without the revolution, the movement around the sun, we wouldn't have seasons either. As we continue into talking about reasons for the seasons, we go right back into tilt. Also, with the tilt, we ask the question, why is it warmer near the equator? Well, it's receiving more direct rays, and at the poles it's less direct, so that energy gets spread out, and it's not quite as intense as what it receives at the equator. So northern hemisphere, as we head south towards the equator, you're going to get warmer temperatures generally throughout the year, and actually in the southern hemisphere you're going to head north for that same hopeful weather. Difference between meteors, meteoroids, and meteorites, I think, can be started out with meteorites and the IT. Notice those are capitalized. They're capitalized on purpose. So we talk about it hitting the surface. That's going to be the meteorite. IT, meteorite. Hit, IT. Meteoroid, I always try and think of the oi and the outer. So the oid and outer, meteoroid and outer space. And then finally a meteor, that's going to be found burning up in the atmosphere. And common name for that's going to be a shooting star. Okay, crater formation. We talked and looked at this again in my room. It's going to be when a meteorite hits the surface and creates a crater. Now, you need to go back to your notebook. Check your claims and evidence. Go back to your notebook. Check your claims and evidence. See what affected the size. Remember, we changed that to diameter and depth of a crater. You had a claim for each of those and evidence. So your source there is your notebook. And then next, as you think about your investigation of Mr. Core's room, differences between Earth and the Moon, again, go to your notebook. You had claims and evidence on this topic. And as you've come to find out, a lot of our questions have been asking for claims and evidence as answers. So you can also prepare answering these questions in that format. Okay, again, quiz is on Wednesday. We'll do a little review on Tuesday. Hopefully you're using this to check your study guide, and those study guides get filled out.